Shooting in the rain, this week on Mail Call Mondays. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to our Labor Day Mail Call Mondays. I hope you guys are having a great holiday. Unfortunately, I have to work today, so this is going to be a little bit of a short Mail Call Mondays. What we're going to talk about on this Mail Call Mondays is shooting precision rifles in the rain. This Sunday we had our local tactical rifle match, our precision rifle match, and of course it rained on us like it does from time to time here in the Ohio River Valley. So we got to experience a little bit of a light drizzle. Luckily, it wasn't just an incredibly heavy downpour, because regardless of how well your equipment works or how well your mindset is, when the rain is really coming down, it just makes it really difficult to actually see targets. So luckily we only had a light drizzle, and then it tapered off towards the end of the match, but it was still enough to start causing some problems in some equipment. And so of course it brought up a really good topic for us to discuss. Now, first off, let's just get this off the board. You do not make any kind of adjustment for rain or no rain in your ballistic tables. The actual fact that there are droplets of water falling from the sky does not factor into your ballistics. Humidity, temperature, pressure, all that still factors in, but it factors in the same way that it would on a clear, sunny, dry day. There are a couple of experiments that were done back in World War II. There have been experiments since then about supersonic projectiles and water droplets in the air. Basically, this bullet is traveling at such an extreme speed, and it is pushing a bow wake in front of it, a pressure wave in front of it, that the bullet does not actually contact any of the water. So it's pretty much pushing raindrops out of the way as it goes down range, or at least that's the way that I understand it. I can tell you from my experience that I have not actually witnessed a bullet strike a raindrop, and I haven't witnessed any ballistic effects downrange that would lead me to believe that something like that is occurring. Where rain starts to cause a problem for us is in the weapon system and in your mindset. First of all, let's talk about the rifles. We like to shoot these high performance rifles like the 260 sitting in front of me. To get the best ballistic performance out of these rifles, we need to push that bullet as fast as we can safely push the bullet. So a lot of guys will get a little bit overzealous, and they will skirt the absolute edge of pressure on these cartridges. That's fine on a nice, cool, dry day. It can cause you problems when you start to creep into the summer months, because temperatures elevate, that increases pressures in the chamber, and then you can have problems then. What guys don't think about is how that is going to be affected on cool, rainy days. While the temperature is not what is really killing us, what happens is you get moisture in your chamber, you get moisture on your cartridges. Really, no matter how careful you are, you still get them a little bit damp, even if it's just from handling them with your fingers. There's no way to actually keep those cartridges perfectly dry when they go into the rifle. You even have rain blowing in through your ejection port when you're running the bolt. So a little bit of that water makes its way into the chamber, and the chambers on our precision rifles are usually not hot enough to boil that water off right away. So the water starts to take up some of that air gap between the brass wall case and the steel chamber. When you fire that cartridge, your cartridge or your brass case can't expand as much as it normally would. This effectively makes the combustion area smaller than it would normally be. Now, if you're lighting off the same amount of oxygen and the same amount of powder in a smaller vessel, you're going to increase the pressures. And what this will usually manifest itself as is stuck cases and blown primers. We saw actually quite a few of those instances this Sunday. One guy was popping primers on almost every round on his rifle. He'd actually blow primers out of the back of the case. Part of that can be from using the brass close to the end of its life, and then the moisture in the chamber can increase that problem. Other times it's just a matter of running right at the ragged edge of pressure. So you need to keep those things in mind when you're actually trying to work up your load. Another thing to keep in mind is that you are bumping the shoulder back, or that you're resizing your cartridges enough. Because again, when they start getting wet, stuff starts sticking to them. You have that little bit of extra water, and when you ram that cartridge into the chamber, you can jam it in there really good, not actually get the bolt to go into battery, and this causes all kinds of problems there. So we don't want to run the ragged edges of pressure on any of our match ammo. I tend to bring it back down and run in the safe range pretty well. I can usually go quite a bit higher on all my loads in my match guns, but for absolute utter reliability, I don't do that. I keep the pressure down to where I've got a safety window. If things get nasty, if things start going wrong, then I'm not popping primers and I'm not sticking cases, because that can really screw up your performance on a stage. Now, other things that you really have to be aware of is your trigger. Your trigger is a very precise machined instrument. If you are running one of these bench rest style triggers and you are starting to get water and dirt and dust and stuff inside that trigger, you can run into some problems. You can run into bigger problems if you've got that trigger dialed down to 8 ounces. So you definitely want to keep your trigger in mind. If you start running into problems, you may be able to flush it out with lighter fluid there on the line and get it back going, or it may be a situation where you have to pull the gun off the line because it's no longer safe to run. So trigger is definitely something to think about. This rifle, I'm running the factory Remington 700, the pre-2006 trigger. It's adjusted to about 2.5 pounds. It is an acceptable trigger as far as reliability goes, as long as you understand the trigger and know what to watch out for on it. As far as really hard use triggers for the Remington 700, I like the Timney triggers because they use a trigger blocking safety. You don't have to worry about the trigger sticking and then running into a fire on bolt close situation. So Timney triggers are great for if you're going to be working in the rain and in the muck and in adverse conditions. Other things to bear in mind is your bolt. Make sure that you got your bolt lubed up pretty well. On Remingtons like this, you can start to get surface rust on the bolt fairly quickly in adverse conditions, so keep a nice coat of lube on it. Also, you really don't want a super tight action if you shoot routinely in the rain and in the nastiness, because rain will cause dirt to stick to everything. You'll be amazed at what rain will bring up off the ground, and that will all stick to the outside of your bolt body, and when you start running that bolt, you're dragging all that stuff into the action. It can cause things to bind up. As far as the weapon system itself, that is usually the limits of what I see rain cause problems with. Now, when we climb up in here into optics, we have a whole nother set of problems, mainly fogging. You want to be really careful in rainy conditions and in cold conditions that you do not breathe on your ocular lens. You breathe on your ocular lens back here, especially when you're on the line and you're getting ready to go. It can fog up really fast, and then you're running into problems. You're scrambling to try to wipe that off. The objective lens, it caught me at least once on this match here, because I have gotten into the habit, and it's a good habit to have, of when you come off the line, you immediately close your scope covers to protect your optics and pull your rifle off. Well, I had closed them up. The rifle, obviously, because it's getting hot while I'm shooting it, the conditions were just perfect that my objective lens fogged up pretty good. Now, as soon as I pop these open, then it will defog and you'll be just fine. The coatings on the Night Force Beast are just fine as far as anti-fog coatings, but if you cap that up, then it's going to fog up pretty quick on you. So you want to make sure that you bring something with you, nice soft cotton cloth, something that you can wipe those lenses off with quick. If they do fog up, keep that inside a Ziploc bag somewhere that it's going to be dry and it's not going to get grit and dirt and oil and all kinds of other nastiness on it. You may want to consider leaving your scope caps open so that they don't fog up. It's a trade-off, because if they're open and they're wet, then you got more of a chance of dirt and dust and stuff sticking to your lenses. But if they fog up, you're going to have problems IDing targets downrange. So as far as optics, fogging is really the main problem. Now, if you just get water drops on the objective lens, don't worry about them. Small water drops on your objective lens really are not going to obscure your view. Usually they will just blur out. If you get a lot of water drops building up on it, then you can run into problems. What I will do is, when I come off the firing line and I know I have some time before I'll go up again, and I have a covered place to set my rifle so it's not actually being rained on, then I will blow the water off of my objective lens. Now, that will obviously cause it to immediately fog up, but if I blow the water droplets off, the big drops, it fogs up, and then it has some time for that fog to dissipate before I need to shoot again. So that's just one of the techniques I use. It's not exactly the greatest technique, but it keeps me from dragging things across my lenses when they may have some dust, dirt, grime, or whatever. And this rifle at this point, since we've shot it all season in the PRS season, it has dust and grime packed into every nook and cranny of it. I really need to break it down completely and clean it when we get to the end of the season here. But this rifle is shot several times a week, and so it really gets nasty fairly quickly. That is really it as far as the effects on the rifle. Specific systems may have different nooks and crannies where water can get into it. I've never really had a problem with water getting in and affecting the bedding. Obviously, when we have things like the Whiskey 3 chassis here, we have a very generous free float up here, so I don't have to worry about water getting in there and causing any kind of issues. And usually while we are shooting it, the barrel in action is getting warm enough that it's evaporating any water that would have gotten down into the chassis and between the chassis and the action. So not a problem there. For magazines, we're using AICS magazines, and they're extremely reliable in just about any condition that I've run them in. So we didn't have any problems there as far as the magazines were concerned. Now, you will see when we show match footage here at the end of this video that there were a couple of times where I ran into some situations on the barricade. One was where I was shooting through several different positions and I was quickly moving the rifle in and out of the barricade, and instead of keeping my trigger finger up here high, I think I came down and I bumped the magazine, and I actually dumped the magazine on the ground. So that's something that, that was a user error. It wasn't an error in the system. So I want to make sure you guys understand what happened on that. It's not magazines falling out of the KRG. It's just that I bumped it, it dumped it, we picked it up and drove on, and I still had plenty of time on that stage, I think. The other problem that I ran into was, again, a user error issue. One of our obstacles is a roof prop, and I was running a 10-round magazine, and I had enough pressure on the front of the magazine on the edge of the rooftop that it actually caused the magazine to drop down enough that when I went to bolt up around, it skipped right over top. And that's a problem that I've run into with a couple of different systems. If you have any kind of slack in here, then you can run into systems where you overrun the cartridge and you don't feed a cartridge. And as you can see in the video, all I did was come back off that a little bit. It fed just fine, and I was good to go. So you want to be careful in some situations running your magazine into a barricade. Very often I do it, but again, it's a perfect storm. If you push up right on this corner and it causes the back of the magazine to drop down, then the bolt will skip right over a cartridge and you won't chamber a cartridge. So enough on that. While you're out shooting, mindset is a really, really big deal. A lot of guys, when the rain starts coming in, they start to get cold and wet. Even on a hot summer day, if you're sitting out in the rain, you're going to start losing body heat and you're going to start getting chilled. once that starts coming in, guys start to climb into their own personal bubble and they just really get a bad attitude about things. And that can most definitely affect your shooting. So try to stay upbeat, try to stay moving around, try to talk to people, find things to do. You don't just want to go sit in a corner and think about how bad things suck when you're getting rained on. Rain's a fact of life. You know, if you live somewhere like Pacific Northwest or you live down here in the Ohio River Valley, you get rained on quite a bit. So deal with it, drive on. Clothing is really an important factor. Now, we lucked out because almost everything that we shot on our 500-yard line, which has a covered firing line. So we would go out and we'd have to shoot out from underneath the cover, but then we can come back in underneath cover, and the temperatures were high enough that your body heat would start drying stuff out. Again, we weren't working in a deluge. It was just a misting rain, so it would get things damp and then you could come back in and dry out. For that, I just chose a synthetic t-shirt that I knew was going to wick moisture away, and a set of 511 strike pants, and both worked just fine. However, I did have a fleece and a soft shell in the truck, so if it started coming down harder and I started to soak that t-shirt through, then I could put on the fleece, I could put on the soft shell, and I could keep a little bit of heat inside my core, which is where it's important. My lower body is still going to get soaked. That's life. I find that I am less susceptible to losing heat through my lower body than I am through my core. My legs just really don't have a problem. In colder temperatures, I'll generally wear less on my legs than a lot of comparable people would. So I wasn't worried about that, but I wanted to make sure that I had something that I could keep that heat in my core if I really started to get soaked through. So keep that in mind, even if it's a relatively warm day, because we had temperatures in the 70s. You wouldn't think that that's cool. You wouldn't think that's a temperature you would normally need a jacket. Bring a jacket anyway. That way you can bundle up if you start getting chilled. Luckily, again, that didn't happen, but it's nice to know, especially for the mental game, that I do have something should that happen. I'm prepared to deal with it. Now, another issue that you run into in the wet is what you write your dope on, what you record, and what you're going to need for your stages. I run an Under Armour wrist coach, and I was using alcohol markers for it. Well, alcohol markers work great if you write down your dope on your plastic window, and then it can dry. Then when it gets rained on, it doesn't affect the alcohol markers. If the window or the plastic that you want to write on has already gotten wet, it is a pain to get it dry enough that the alcohol markers will also dry on it, and you won't get a situation where it can smear off. First couple of stages I ran with just alcohol pen written on the window. As it was raining, it was causing this to bead up. It was causing a big enough problem to where I really couldn't read my dope clearly anymore. So I had to wipe that off. I went and jumped in the truck where it was nice and dry, pulled out my index cards and wrote my dope on an index card, and then shoved it back in with I wrote it on the index card with a ballpoint pen, and shoved it back in my wrist coach, and that worked just fine for the rest of the day. So that's something to keep in mind, how you're going to keep your dope out there, how you're going to keep it dry. If you're shooting something that's a more static position, you're not moving in and out of barricades, then what I've done in the past is take a Write and Rain notebook. You can write your dope down on that, and even in the misting rain, Write and Rain notebooks and a ballpoint pen will work just fine. If it's pouring, then you start to run into problems. Even with that, that paper will still get a little bit moist, and you can start tearing it while you're trying to write on it. In those cases, a great big gallon Ziploc bag is a great option. I have a medium-sized Write and Rain notebook. I can scribble stuff down on it, stick it in the gallon Ziploc bag, and you can read that even if you're out on the line uncovered with the rain coming down. If you need to write something, you stick your hand inside the Ziploc bag to write something down. You don't have to take anything out of it. Drawback is you need to make sure you have a shorter pen, because if it's a really long pen, you run into problems with it interfering with the bag. So we've done that in the past. I don't recommend that if it's pouring that you take your full-blown data book out. I recommend using something like Write and Rain or a scratch pad or something that you can note your data down on, and then you can put it back in your data book later on. Worst comes to worst, you can take pages out of your data book if you're using something like Impact Data Book's modular data book. Take your pages out, use the pages that you need to use there, and then when you come back in, even if those pages got soaking wet, you can lay them out, you can let the pages dry, and then you can put them back in your data book when they're dry. But if you take your whole data book out, there's really a good possibility that your data book is going to get soaked and may destroy previous information. So keep that in mind. That really is about all there is to shooting in the rain. It's just a little bit of a mental game. It's a little bit that you have to prepare for before you go out in your loading, and a little bit that you have to prepare for while you're actually executing the firing task. Other than that, get out and shoot in the rain. If you see it raining on a day, don't cancel your rain day. Actually get out and do it. Shooting in the rain is a lot of fun. I enjoy shooting in the rain or shooting on rainy days, not necessarily laying out in the rain, because generally the range will be empty and I'll have the range all to myself. So get out on those rainy days and give it a try. I definitely recommend that you get out and train in the rain before you have to go shoot a match in the rain, because that can just add pressure on top of it when you're trying to perform to your utmost in a situation that you've never been in before. Now, once you've got done with your shoot in the rain and you come back, there are a couple of things that you have to think of. First and foremost, your weapon system needs to be taken care of as soon as you come back in. Don't throw it in the safe and get to it the next day, 2 days later, etc. These weapon systems are steel. They will rust, and you will end up with all kinds of problems. Now, what I've noticed with mine, these are precision rifles. I don't like cleaning the barrel very often. I don't have much of a problem with the environment inside the barrel of the rifle. I make sure that I'm shooting it at a regular pace. As soon as I'm done shooting it, I don't wait for the rifle to cool off quite a bit. I just make sure it's cool enough that it's not going to damage a case, and then I go ahead and case the rifle for the trip back home. What that will do is, the barrel is hot, it's going to keep moisture from building up inside the actual bore of the rifle. This prevents you from having to go through a full cleaning. Now, it may still be a good idea for you to run a bore snake through the bore just to make sure that there's no moisture left in there, no water droplets in your chamber, etc. But I do not do a full cleaning on the barrel. Now, if you are worried about rust inside your barrel, then go ahead and do a full cleaning. The peace of mind will help you out. Just know that you're going to have to go foul that rifle out again before you get the utmost accuracy out of it. What I'm more concerned of on this system, since I'm running a stainless steel barrel here, is the receiver. This is still a chromoly steel receiver, and it is the regular Remington matte blued finish on it. We haven't sent this rifle off to Cerakote yet. So this receiver will rust if you look at it sideways. So it's very important as soon as I get home to wipe down the outside of the receiver and oil it up. I just covered it with some M Pro 7. I pull the bolt out, wipe the bolt down, wipe down the inside of the receiver. All the exposed metal on it, it gets wiped down with a coating of oil. I let that oil sit for a little while, and then I wipe the oil back off. The optic, we just brush everything off. I go ahead, and once the lenses are dry, I leave the scope caps open to let the lenses dry. I will go in and I'll clean them off with a soft cloth. You can use some acetone or alcohol just to get those lenses cleaned out again. On this scope, actually, what I allowed it to do is I allowed it to dry, got in there with a lens pen, brushed the lens off with a lens pen, and then used the felt cleaner portion of the lens pen to get any actual water droplet spots cleaned back off. The chassis, I don't really worry about breaking the action out of the chassis in conditions like we had where it was a light spray. Now, if you actually have this out and it is pouring rain, then I do recommend removing the action from the chassis, wiping down the bottom of the action, making sure it's dry. You may want to put a surface coat of oil on and then wipe that surface coat of oil off really well before you torque it back into the chassis. You don't want oil between the action and the chassis, and you definitely don't want oil between the action and any glass bedding that you have going on there. So make sure all your exposed portions of metal on your rifle are taken care of. If you have a bunch of little fasteners on the chassis system, even though the majority of our chassis system here is aluminum, you need to make sure you go over and hit a little bit of oil on the heads of each one of those fasteners, because those will rust up. If you run a Harris bipod, the springs on here are notorious for rusting. So make sure that you get some oil on those, clean them out. Make sure you pop your legs out and actually get oil on the leg segments inside of it, because if you leave those legs collapsed in the safe, they will rust up. Now once you've gone over everything, you've wiped everything down, you've taken care of your scope, you've made sure that your receiver is oiled up and wiped down. When you go to put the rifle back in the safe, what I recommend is keep your legs on your bipod deployed, keep your scope caps open when you place it back in the safe. I'm going to assume most of you that have gun safes have dehumidifiers running in them, or golden rods or something to keep the humidity controlled in the gun safe. So after you've removed as much water from the system as you possibly can, put it in there, keep the scope open, and let it sit in the safe, and that will help just dry out any residual moisture that was anywhere that you missed. There are a lot of nooks and crannies and seals and stuff in this optic that moisture can get into, and it takes a little while for that to get back out. Now you really want to leave your scope caps open, because when you close those scope caps up, you can run into situations on some older scopes where you have fungus that will start growing on your lenses and growing in the optic, and that can kill an optic really quickly. So you don't want that fungus to take a chance to grow, so keep everything open so that it's exposed to moving air. I can't say that it's a problem on the 9-Force. I can't say it's a problem on any of the Bushnells that we've run into. They have really good hydrophobic coatings on them. But on older scopes, fungus was an issue. I haven't seen it on these, but just to be on the safe side, I still leave my scope caps open for a day or two afterwards, just to make sure that it is really well taken care of. Now this rifle, I'm lucky because we have the shop here, so I'll leave a rifle sitting out on the bench in the shop so that it has a good deal of warm air flowing around it to help it cool off. But those are just some ideas there. Make sure when you come back, anything in your pack, you bust your pack open and let that dry out as well, because you don't want that to mildew. You don't want anything in there to turn to mush or get ugly. That's about it as far as shooting in the rain. I really can't think of anything else that we haven't covered, but if you have questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. Thank you guys for putting up with my kind of short Mail Call Mondays episode. I'm going to go ahead and throw up some GoPro camera footage of a couple of the different stages that we shot this weekend. I don't have a ton of footage because it was raining and I didn't really get a chance to get the better cameras out until after it stopped raining. And again, I was actually concentrating on trying to do fairly good on this match, so there were a couple of stages I forgot to turn the GoPro on. Trying to get a little bit better about that, so I apologize, but I think I caught some stages that you guys will enjoy watching. So stay tuned for that. Again, if you got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you've liked this video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, no matter if it's dry or raining cats and dogs, get out and shoot.
I was done. I already knew what I was going to do.
You did 6?
Yeah.
You get Tom?
No.
7, didn't you?
7.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah, you got 7. That's good, man. That's solid.
Yeah.
Scope's nice and fogged up now. I'll let the cap close. On the buzzer. You ready? Stand by. Sure is ready.
Bye.
Impact. 90. Impact. Miss. Start over. Impact. Impact.
Start over. Impact. Impact.
Take what I can take.
Did you see where you're at?
I didn't see where I was at on the third one.
You're off to the right side.
Ah, okay.
On command, establish a hasty firing position from the 8-position barricade. Shooter will have 10 rounds to engage either the large or the small B1.
Which one?
B1.
B1.
On the
right
left
to the left
side.
of the diamonds
Left
up there
side.
on the berm.
2 IPSC target. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
2 IPSC.
It looks like white, orange, white.
Yeah.
A 45 and a 66. The 45 is worth 3 points a hit. The 66 is worth 2. Shooter will have 10 rounds to engage either the large or the small from all 8 positions. 1 hit per position. Any remaining rounds are a 2-point bonus. Do not close your bolt until you're in your firing position. We don't want sky loading. Impact. Impact. This system you gotta start over and you just get one shot. Impact. No, as many as you want. I mean, which impact! Big target's 1 mil high. Impact! It's a mil high, so impact!
Plenty of time.
Small.
Roger. Six seconds. Looked a little low on that last one there.
I cranked it. I cranked it.
Then back to the spool 2 and 2.
We're leaving the spool like that?
Yeah.
It was
This
kind
is the one where on
it's
your
like
way
an
back, you're
unstable
really
position
careful
all the
about
time, so I don't know how to.
pointing your muzzle.
We're gonna go off the top of the spool or the bottom? Top. Oh, we're just asking.
Hey, Isaac, how much
There's
time
a
on this
bottom
one?
to it.
230.
And you have to be all the way on the roof.
You have to be all the way on the roof.
Both feet.
Yeah. Now when you miss them off the pipe, I was like, what the hell? Next shooter.
Did it reset?
Yeah, I reset it.
Okay.
Shit, ready?
Large unless I say otherwise. Small.
Roger that. Impact.
Large.
Large. Impact.
Small! Small! Small!
Small. Impact. Nice job. John. That was solid, man. Good shooting.
Oh, there were a couple of those I cranked like nothing.
Yeah, that was good, man. That was
You got
real
one up
solid.
there, two up there or something?
I got one here. Thank you. Two on each target, move, and then expend the remaining on the little one, right?
If you first round, just move on. Follow me?
Yes.
But a maximum of 2 at each target. Except for the bonus.
Shooter ready?
Stand by. Ready.
Impact, first round. Impact, second round. Move to target 4, round 1 at target 4, or A4.
Ah!
Bonus target.
Say again.
Move to bonus target.
Bonus target. Left, right, left, right.
All around
Yep.
it, yeah.
Left, right, left, right.
Yep, Tom. Line's down there.